We are standing on what's called the bluffs, or the panorama bluffs, and it overlooks the Kern River oil fields, which is one of the largest oil fields in the state of California. If Kern County were a state, it would be in the top 5 oil producers in the nation. To put this in a little more context, 75% of all of oil production in California is done in Kern County, and over 50% of the natural gas that's produced in California is right here in Kern County. The people of Kern County, they knew there was oil here. And the reason why they knew is for thousands of years, the Yokuts Indians had been using oil as a glue, in their baskets and on their projectile points, arrowheads. What they ended up doing first was people started mining for oil, just like they would mine for gold. And they started making kerosene. And so that was as early as the late 1850s, early 1860s. The discovery well that really started the oil boom in Kern County, May 1899, near the banks of the Kern River on Thomas Means property. They brought in Milton McWhorter, who was known for drilling for oil, but it was the Elwoods who were the ones who actually did the work in drilling that discovery well. They ended up drilling several feet, and they did find oil, but no one really believed it at the time. And it wasn't until a man by the name of Angus Kreitz, who wrote for the Daily Californian, wrote that there was actually oil out here, that within 2 months there were 200 oil companies drilling for oil out in this field that you see behind me. So there was so much oil that was being produced out of here that it was kind of like the gold rush. When gold was taken back to Washington, D.C., it wasn't very long before the 49ers were out here just scrambling for it. And that's the same thing that you saw with the discovery of oil. There was actually a small town that sprang up right down here below the bluffs called Oil Center. And they had their own school, they had rec hall, they had transportation. They had all the things that you needed to have a town. And they built lease houses all around so the families could live there. And they even had what you might call apartments or dormitories where single men would live and then families would live as well. So it was a matter of keeping them there on the property, keeping them close, and getting them to work as much as possible to pull that precious mineral from the grounds. It was a challenging life. Because if they were living in a tent house, then you're going to have the weather issue in the summer, so it's going to be very hot. All of these people were looking for the same thing. They were looking to strike it rich. And if someone they felt was infringing upon their territory, they would go to whatever method they had to in order to protect what they thought was their property. So there were issues of gun violence, of fights, of beatings, of things like that. But it wasn't to the point where it was a really huge problem, because once you have those things happen a few times, I think people get the message. They had a piece of equipment called a yeller dog. And what they did is they put flammable material inside what looked like a kettle, but it had 2 spouts on it. And what it did is it put flames out. You think of how dangerous that would be on a wooden derrick, but they did that to produce light so they could keep working. Time not working meant they weren't drilling, they weren't getting to the oil. And a lot of these companies, sponsored by outside entities from San Francisco and different places, they wanted a return on their investment. We go back to May of 1899 when we had the oil discovery and then the big boom. Then the oil scene, it was harder to get. In the 1920s, there was another boom, brought thousands upon thousands of people to Bakersfield. Again, new technology. You know, they started using steel derricks. They could get taller derricks, drill further. But I would say if you look at it now, compared to back then with all the technology we have, we're pulling just as much oil out of the ground now as we were back in 1900. Okay, we have driven down from the Panorama Bluffs. We've just went over the river, and now we are into the Kern River oil field. And there are just massive numbers of oil wells and what's referred to as horses' heads, the actual pulling the oil up from the ground that are working away. So as far as oil companies are concerned, the major companies are here, the major players. So the Chevrons, the Era, the Berry Petroleums, and Occidental, and they're all in Kern County. But you also have what's called the Independent Oil Producers Association, and that's made up of just a myriad of smaller companies, and that'd be like the one you see before you right now. And what they're trying to do is basically get it to produce more oil. And with each one of those repetitions, that means that a little bit more oil is coming out of the ground for consumers across the United States. The production is taking place here, and it gets transported via a variety of ways, mainly pipeline. And those pipelines are going to take that to refineries. There are some refineries here in Kern County, but most of them are outside of the county. Maintenance is basically what's taking place behind us. And most of these wells have been drilled, and they're maintaining them to make sure that they're efficient and they're producing the most oil that they can possibly be producing. Some of the challenges, if you read or watch newspapers or watch TV, is things like fracking and injecting chemicals or steam, into the ground. So there are some concerns about that people are bringing up. They haven't brought them up so much here in Kern County, but elsewhere. But I think our industry professionals are working really hard on making sure that they are not only protecting the community, but they're protecting their investment as well. The oil industry in Kern County has meant a lot since the early days when they were just digging for kerosene to now when they're using high-tech equipment to keep the oil coming from the ground. It is vital to our economy, and it is something that is going to be still producing and still being vital to our economy for years to come.